like to call a finance meeting to order. Do we have any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move into the next item, and this is an employee recognition. Normally, we don't do these during the finance meeting, but we had a tough time getting our dates together here, and Jonelle Dar has been gracious enough to come in today so that we can recognize her for her many years of service to the county. Jonelle, we do have a couple of things here for you. One is a certificate of recognition, but also let you know that my colleagues and I and our chief clerk have purchased 4 books that we're going to gift to the Cumberland County Library System Professional Collection in honor of you on your retirement as executive director of the Cumberland County Library System. I know you don't like recognition, but you're going to have to put up with it for a few minutes. We'd like you to come up here and so we can officially give this to you.
Should read the presentation.
I'm going to read the entire thing.
Yeah, okay.
If I may.
I'm going to move the chair.
Commissioner Eichelberg could not be here today, but he does send his congratulations and thanks for your service.
Can I say, first of all, thank you for signing the library taxing.
A big thank you.
Walking to the sunset.
Yeah. That decision was unanimous. We fully support the library system. But let me read this to you, folks.
Thank you.
Cumberland County Board of Commissioners hereby recognizes and honors Jonelle Dar. Whereas the Cumberland County Board of Commissioners hereby recognizes and honors Jonelle on the occasion of her retirement from Cumberland County with 24 years of service and dedication to the Cumberland County Library System. Whereas throughout her career, Jonelle has distinguished herself by her thoughtful leadership, patient attention to detail, and relentless commitment to the library services. And whereas Jonelle's leadership has fostered cooperation and coordination among the 7 libraries and 1 branch of Cumberland County's federated systems of library, which have an annual circulation of 2.6+ million items and a budget of $6.4 million. And whereas during her tenure, she worked successfully to expand and improve library services through computer and internet technologies, increase staff and library efficiencies by centralizing support services, and with the installation of the library's first public access internet stations, collaborated with county government to bring high-speed telecommunications and a website presence to the system. And whereas over her 24 years of service, Jonelle has experienced exceptional success in securing funding through federal, state, and local sources, has advocated on behalf of public libraries across the state, served on the board of the Pennsylvania Humanities Council, and served a term as chair of the Association of the Pennsylvania Public Library Systems, where she has actively assisted that organization's efforts to strengthen library systems in the Commonwealth. And whereas Jonelle served the Pennsylvania Library Association with distinction and professionalism as president in 2004, and during her presidency established the Futures Committee, which began a multi-year strategic planning process that provided guidance and direction for the association. Now, therefore, on behalf of Cumberland County, the commissioners wish to recognize and thank Jonelle for her many years of dedicated leadership and faithful service to the citizens of Cumberland County, presented this 7th day of December 2016. Jonelle, thank you very much for your service. I mean, you know, we all have passions in our life, and this lady's passion was certainly evident in our library system, which I would say without hesitation is the best county library system in this state. Jonelle, thank you very much for all that you've done. I know other people would like to say something. If you'd like to get a quick picture here. Mr. Bursford, Commissioner.
I'm just relieved that none of these books say how to do it better after the executive director.
It's implicit.
Okay, any other smile? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to also thank Janelle for her dedicated service over nearly a quarter century.
Before the internet was around.
And there has been, there's no stronger an advocate for our library system than Janelle. And she's helped to, educate me as to the value of the libraries, throughout our county. And, I know that we worked very hard, on the development of the most recent MOU that I was honored to have the privilege to sign along with my colleagues. I said to Jonelle, I said, it's just a shame that, you weren't in the position to be able to sign that MOU because of all the hard work that you put into it. But, our library systems and our libraries are alive and well. One of the difficulties we had was, with the state funding cuts of over $5 million over the past 8 years alone, and trying to balance and keep our libraries in good stead has not been an easy job, I know. But at the end of the day, I think that our greater community will be better served, and a lot of the thanks goes to you, Janelle. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Don't be a stranger now.
I won't be.
You're only going to work over the Department of Ed, right?
Right.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
See you folks.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have presentation, juvenile probation department, recidivism report, Sam and Robert. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, I couldn't be here today, so I'm going to do my best to handle this. I want to start off by saying back in late 2011, early 2012, the Board of Commissioners approved our application for a grant from PCCD. It was a part of the Juvenile Justice System Enhancement Strategy initiative that was being rolled out throughout the state. This specific piece was a stage 4 analysis to show outcomes, specifically in this case recidivism risk reduction. With that being said, bear with me here. I'm kind of fighting a little bit of a cold, so I'm going to pause here. Yeah, it's going around. I want to lead off by saying, there's 5 priorities in the justice system, whether it's the adult criminal justice system or the juvenile justice system. One is public safety, speaks for itself, safe communities. One is restoration, that's taking care of victims, making victims whole, meeting their needs to the best of your ability whenever a judge is passing sentence or whether there's a disposition in juvenile court. These are 2 of the things that a judge balances when they're rendering a decision. Another can be deterrence. There are times that dispositions or sentences are passed down that are meant to deter others from doing whatever act it was. Another may be incapacitation. Some characters are so bad that they simply must not be a part of society, and that can be a prioritized part of a sentence or disposition. The last is risk reduction. This particular presentation deals with risk reduction, which I just wanted you to keep in mind. It's just one piece of what our mission is and our goals, but it obviously is an important piece. I want to start with slide 1 here and show you that the research that was started in 2009 and came to fruition as a part of the grant we received in 2012 and 13, we've carried through after the grant. We've established methodology to continue to track youth and to report recidivism and risk reduction. We can see here that we started with calendar year 2009, 2012. I think I'm going to be able to, yeah, okay. We've also moved on, clear up the present year. Now, what's significant in this here slide is that from 9 to 12, what we were doing was looking at tracking youth who we had supervised. So the sample is made up of every youth referred in 2009 that makes its way to some type of supervision in our office, or 2010 or 11 or 12. For instance, in 2009, there were 328 juveniles that received some type of supervision disposition that we were working with. And what this chart shows is the maturity. We track them till age 21, and it shows how many have achieved age 21, whether or not there's any, still some of them are active cases. There's some really problematic characters that may still be in our system, but it shows that we have a relatively mature sample here as the study has progressed. Starting in 2013, we reclarified the definition of recidivism to align with the state, and it was not tracking juveniles until age 21. It was 2 years post-discharge. So what would happen is a youth in 2013, there was 283 of them, after they had completed supervision, from the data closeout, 2 years out, we would track them for any subsequent juvenile delinquency adjudication or any criminal arrest resulting in conviction. That parallels the state definition. I have to tell you that the reason we established, the reason I established it the way it is you may recall back around these years, there was significant dialogue in this county, in this jurisdiction, about the overcrowding at the prison. There were significant costs inherent with all the renovations and more projected building that was going to have to go on out there. And it was really important to collect data, from my view, as to what the drivers for that were. So this was one of the reasons we tracked to age 21 in the first 4 years of the sample. A few demographics before we get into the meat of it. You can see here all the referrals. There's more than 1,800 juveniles. This runs pretty much parallel to data you would see from other jurisdictions. You know, most of our referrals are 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds. You can see we do get a few that are very young, but it's the breakdown. Male, female. Now this is from 2009 to current data of 2015 and 16. I can tell you that the most recent couple of years, the female breakdown is closer to 30%. Essentially, it's becoming more and more of an equal opportunity sport, or however you want to characterize that. So, but the overall for those years, that is the breakdown of male and female. This is the ethnic breakdown, the racial breakdown. And I can tell you also that as of the last couple of years, the African American and the biracial and the Latino has increased. It's closer to 20% now. Children and youth involvement, we track this just to try to indicate drivers. You know, when anecdotal stories are being told, most of the adult criminal justice system will say, geez, it seems like every adult offender we're dealing with was involved with juvenile probation. And then juvenile probation, when they're telling their stories, they say, it seems like every kid we're dealing with was involved with children and youth. I wanted to see what the data said. And it shows here that, you know, about a quarter of the kids we deal with had children and youth involvement. This is a breakdown of family circumstances. You know, we believe that's one of the drivers that need to be looked at, and it shows here that 68% are not living with both parents, 20% do. School status, education is obviously a big thing, so we were looking at case closeout, you know, how many kids were in school, how many had dropped out, etc. cyber school. It's a growing phenomenon. That 6% is a larger percentage now. Over time, that's slowly growing. You get more and more kids that are taking advantage of that. So, demographic highlights. Put the whole page up for you. Race, our conclusions are at this point that race has an impact on CYS involvement, children and youth involvement, school status or cyber school participation. Caucasians have a greater likelihood of living with both parents at closeout. Living with both parents was connected with lower levels of CYS involvement. So if a young person has an intact family, there was less probability they were going to be referred to children and youth. It also increases the likelihood that a juvenile remains in school or receives a high school diploma. I don't think that would be a surprise to any of us, increased stability. Okay, supervision factors. 14% of the entire sample had a prior record, 11% multiple referrals. You can see on down through there, 26% came in on violent offenses, by my definition, simple assaults, aggravated assaults, rapes, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, things of that nature. Dispositions, this was the breakdown over all those years of disposition. Youth aid panel is synonymous with informal adjustment. It is our diversion program. It was initially founded by the district attorney's office back in 2003. We took it over after their grant ran out. Since 2004, it's been run out of the juvenile probation department. We do have a consultant, Lisa Harrison, that is the director of the Youth Aid Panel program, and I also have a couple probation officers that work with her in administering and overseeing the misdemeanor Youth Aid Panel offenders. Extremely cost-effective program. Her costs are absorbed through the needs-based budget, which is a budget we share with children and youth. So a $100,000 outlay actually costs the county to $20,000 in real cost. And you can see there that it's basically taking care of about 40% of our population. So very cost-effective way to do our business. Highest grading on petition, this is the misdemeanor felony breakdown. About anywhere from 18% up to 23% of the cases are felonies. Length of probation supervision, I think what's notable about this is we've always been proud of this historically. We do a pretty good job of getting them on and getting them off. Our courts are pretty expedient. It's not an easy process to get them to disposition. We do have a soft target goal that for 60 days from assignment, we want to have a kid brought to disposition. That obviously doesn't happen all the time, but we track that number and we do our very best to meet that. That's very quick. That's quick movement compared to the adult criminal justice system, which has more volume and probably more complex issues. Length of supervision, we're able to move them through their period of supervision and get them off rather quickly. You can see the average stay is 3 to 6 months or 6 to 12 months, in and out. Supervision highlights. Prior record, and I don't think any of these things will surprise you. Prior record really increases the likelihood of multiple referrals in 1 year, higher graded offenses, violent offenses, adjudications of delinquency, longer probation supervision. So if a youth is referred in with a prior record, that's a real danger sign. Multiple referrals in 1 year. Increases the likelihood of violent offenses, adjudication of delinquency, and out-of-home placement, detention, longer probation supervision. That makes sense. If they're doing more acts, there's more going on there. A particular note here is the first chart, disposition by YLSI. That's initial YLS. Now the YLS is our assessment tool. It's what we use when kids come in the front door to try to get a handle on whether they're a high-risk offender, moderate risk offender, low-risk offender. And it also gives us specifics as to what their targeted need areas are. Now, the targeted need areas are things that you and I would be aware of. Substance abuse, education, they're not doing well in school, family circumstances might be poor. There's also some things we might not readily be aware of, like it's called attitudes and orientation. It's pro-criminal thinking. It's an example would be the youth that walks by a parked car with the keys in the ignition. We would walk by that and in all probability say, well, that's not real smart. They left their keys in the ignition, but we would keep walking. Pro-criminal thinking would be the youth that jumped in the car, took it, and then when caught said, well, they deserve to have it stolen because they left their keys in the car. It is a way of thinking, and although, we would laugh at that, I guess, that way of thinking does lead to delinquent or criminal acts. There's some other breakdowns, but when you look at this, you can see that we do have mostly low-risk offenders assigned a youth aid panel, which you would expect to happen. Our diversion or our less intrusive disposition should have the lower risk offenders. And as we have a more intrusive or a more intensive intervention, it will be the higher risk offenders, and that's exactly what that chart tells you. Now this here, the big part of this is a risk reduction chart for 917 youth of the sample that received both an incoming, a YLS initial, and a YLS closeout. One of the important things from my view of the YLS assessment tool is that not all assessment tools are equal. The YLS assessment tool has the ability to actually evaluate whether a reduction in risk is occurring. In other words, you do your initial YLS and a kid might score a 25, which is high risk. The tool is then set up that 6 months down the road, you administer the same instrument, and if the scores come down to 15 and the youth is moderate risk, that youth is still not exactly where you want them to be, but there is improvement occurring. And you can actually look at the targeted areas to focus in on the improvement. You can see here that of all the youth that had both an initial and a closeout, and the reason not every youth in the sample had both those is the assessment tool was a gradual implementation in our office. This was all brand new methodology. We made a decision in 2009 to become an evidence-based organization. Those kinds of things don't happen overnight. Here we are 7, almost 8 years later, and it's still an evolving phenomenon. I saw this as a 10-year initiative, and I think it's accurate. Changing culture, changing from trail and nail and jail 'em, which is important. You need that. You do need to have oversight to be in a behavior change agent and trying to work with youth in a way to get them to think differently. That is a different piece of our job that wasn't necessarily ingrained in the culture when we started back in 2009. So you can see here that of all the youth that received an initial and a closeout, 3.5% increased risk, which is not the desired result. 38.6 remained the same. 57.9% of those entire sample of 917 had a risk reduction. That's very good results. Now we want it to be perfect. We don't want any kid to get worse after we've supervised them, but we do want the numbers to reflect this type of feedback, that we're getting it done. Assessment highlights. Gender and race have no discernible impact on risk level. Living with both parents reduces risk level. Prior CYS involvement increases risk level. Violent offenses have higher risk levels. Sexual offenses have lower risk levels. I would note that the YLS is not an assessment tool set up to evaluate sex offenders. It does give you a snapshot of their delinquent tendencies, but you always have to have a sex offender specific assessment to determine whether a sex offender is high risk or not, because it's different, you're dealing with a different kind of animal. These community-based programs are just examples of the kind of services, they're not all of them, but there are a lot of them, that we offer to kids and that the kids in this sample have been exposed to. So you can see 21% of the kids here were involved in drug and alcohol outpatient, and you can see the raw score there, 394 kids. Outpatient mental health. George Jr. Preventative Aftercare is an in-home service that is a part of the needs-based budget where a counselor from a certain program is court-ordered to work with the youth, and then they try to achieve results with the youth. Go on down. Brief intervention tools is something the probation officers have been administered to do themselves. So part of this process is we do some of these things ourselves. A lot of these programs, Abraxas NRT, Hempfield MST is in Delphi Village MST are what are referred to as blueprint programs. They are evidence-based programs. The MST stands for multi-systemic therapy. Down near the bottom here, you see the NCTI CBI group. The reason I point that out is that is also something that the probation officers have been trained to do and do themselves. We run groups. At the conclusion of each group, there's a graduation. Judge Placey and Judge Maslin always attend those graduations. It's a small sample of kids, but it is problematic kids going through a curriculum administered by probation officers designed to help them think differently, to make better choices, to make better choices both about the friends they hang out with, the incidents they become involved with, and to prioritize differently what they should be doing. Whether if they don't feel like getting up for school in the morning, that they still get up and go to school because they realize there's consequences. That's a hard thing to get kids to do. I know you all are educated and you've read a lot of the literature that's occurred over the last several years, even coming down from the Supreme Court. It's very clear that the adolescent brain is different than a fully developed male or female at age 30. The front part of the brain is the last to develop, that is decision making and weighing consequences. I'm not saying this as an excuse. The bottom line is 16 and 17-year-olds just do not weigh circumstances the same as what we should be doing. And so it is an evolving process with them. These groups have been shown to be effective. I'll have some numbers on that later. Out-of-home programs, drug and alcohol inpatient. Manos is a drug and alcohol inpatient also. Mental health RTFs. ARC, this is an out-of-home. ARC is actually a local service provider out of Harrisburg. Youth service agencies is Camp Adams. Foster care delivered by a variety of entities. Inpatient hospitalizations, George Junior Republic, not large numbers. Here in Cumberland County, for a county our size, we place less youth out of home, and some of the numbers that I'll show you will reinforce this, than any other county our size. And I'm proud of that. We do most of our treatment through community-based functions. Services by YLS risk level. This is an important graph in there. What it shows, one of the benefits of using assessment and following evidence-based practices is you would expect that higher risk youth would get more services or be more prone to be exposed to services. Now the sample's low, there's only 5 of them, very high, then 90 are high, 296 high moderate. Look at the percentage of them that receive some type of service, either substance abuse or mental health. Whereas a low risk, they get less. We still do offer services. It's more voluntary, but we do get a lot of people that come in that might be low risk but borderline, and their parents say, I'm having trouble with Johnny, he's a smart aleck at home, or I think I found something that looked like marijuana. So, we don't just say, well, we can't help you, you're low risk. We do offer services, so there's a certain percentage then that are involved in services, but what I'm saying is the resources you allocate and pay for, they're going to the type of kid that they should be going to. So. Services received by year. This is another chart that I'm proud of. One of the things that happened in our office, and I'll talk a little more about this with one of the graphs coming up, as the probation officers got educated about the concept of risk and need and responsivity and what evidence-based practices were, I had the same, it was tough, there was a lot of resistance and not everybody's on board with it, but what they didn't realize is how much it impacted them. This shows they're going about their job differently. More kids were getting more services from 2009 when we started the initiative to 2014. Look, it went from 40% to 72% of the kids under supervision got services. And at that same time, it went from 18% to 12% went to out-of-home placement, or 8% to 5% went to out-of-home placement, 18% to 12% went to detention, all right? So what this is saying is we were getting more kids services at the same time that we were using less restrictive measures, which are more costly.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Nikki, can you go back to the other slide, Sam? Did you just scroll?
What do you want me to do? Go back?
Yeah. Nikki, is your trend in out-of-home placement similar on the county, or is it the opposite?
No, mine's the opposite.
Usually the opposite.
Because, you know, Sam's focused more on the kid and fix it, and going more with that family.
Gotcha.
You know, my placements are up.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, and quite honestly, this is all true data, but it goes to 14. We have experienced some increases in 15, 16, you know. I mean, we're still doing a pretty good job of managing it, but I'm not sure that that line would still be coming down. It'd either be leveling off or ticking up just a little bit, you know. So it's a challenge. There's no doubt about it. It's a challenge. Okay, service highlights. Remember, 58% of the juveniles in Cumberland County displayed risk reduction. That was that chart a couple slides ago. So one of the ways to look at this, that was from YLS initial to YLS closeout. Several of our community-based interventions are exceeding that. Drug and alcohol outpatient services, 67% received risk reduction. We would consider that good. That's above the standard, you know, that's above the 58%. MST services, 67%. One-on-one programming, 71%. The CBI groups, 85%. This is good news. This means that these services are exceeding the average baseline score that we're receiving back. Okay, now we get to the recidivism. 2009 to 12, in a sample of 1,175. The numbers on the left here at the top are averages. But what I'd like you to look at is look at 2009 in the chart at the right. When we began this initiative, the top line, the green line, at 45% is the percentage of kids that were rearrested before turning age 21 that we had under supervision of some type that had been referred in 2009. And then the 29% is the percentage of them that were convicted, which would be the recidivism. And the 14% is the percentage that ended up being incarcerated, which is the cost driver. Now, that percentage, I don't think that's anything to write home to mom about. That means about half the kids we were supervising were getting arrested for a misdemeanor or a felony offense prior to turning age 21. I don't know that that's all that different from most jurisdictions, but I do know that that's something we should strive to improve. As we began this initiative from 2009 to 2012, we brought that down. We brought all three lines down. There's a little bit of maturing that still has to occur because there's some kids in the sample, but the trend, most of the kids are mature, and it will not change significantly enough that this downward trend will not be evident. Going from 45% to 35%, I think is a result that really shows that introducing the concepts of evidence-based practices, the principles of risk, need, responsivity, has the desired effect. Recidivism by disposition, what this shows you is you would expect kids that were given a youth aid panel disposition to be less likely to get in trouble again, or a consent decree as opposed to a formal or a placement. If this was inverse, what that would mean is us and the courts were making bad decisions as to what type of disposition. So, we should look at this and say, well, geez, I want to bring those numbers down even more, and that's true. But the trend line is absolutely the way it should be. Recidivism by disposition for 13 and 14 also shows the same trend line. Now, recidivism by YLS. The first chart on the left is the initial YLS. If the YLS is giving us accurate information, we would want the trend lines to look like this. In other words, the low-risk kids are getting in trouble again, recidivating less often than the low moderates, or the high moderates, or the highs. Same for 2009, 2012 closeout. This is good news. Now, we understand, you look at this and you go, wow, 31% of the low-risk kids got rearrested, recidivated, okay? Well, actually, the green line is rearrested prior to age 21. That seems kind of high. Well, maybe it is, it's something we need to keep working on. We need to do a good job of. But as compared to 43% or 51% or 60% for the other identified youth. So the trend lines are exactly where they should be. The results we just need to keep working on. Recidivism by YLS. Oh, let me go back a second. There is another point I want to make on this. One of the key pieces of this is terms they call fidelity, validity. Validity is that the YLS tool measures what it says it's going to measure, and we showed that in some of our earlier information. Fidelity is that across, if I have 18 probation officers doing this tool, we want them to all be administering the tool in a similar fashion. We do booster sessions twice a year. We have a quality assurance officer, Rob, who couldn't be here today, he's my evidence-based officer, that actually provides sample tests and then has a baseline score and then measures the probation officers to ensure fidelity. Some POs are better than others, and then we take remedial or corrective instruction to bring them up to speed. What's encouraging here is the trend lines for the initial and the closeout are both the same. The numbers are different, but they're both the same. What this is saying is that the closeout YLS has validity and fidelity, as well as the initial YLS, which means if we're closing a kid out at the end of the case, and we're saying that the kid's low risk, it is true, that's an accurate score, that the kid's less probable to get in trouble again than if the kid was moderate risk or high risk. And if we're closing a kid out at the end of our supervision and it's moderate risk or particularly high risk, sometimes the judge has to do that, maybe because of age or circumstances, or maybe the kid's being sentenced as an adult offender. But the judge knows intellectually this kid's really, there's a very high probability that he's going to keep creating the victim. So it does give a valid piece of information to the courts. A recidivism by YLS for 13-14, same trend lines. Return on investment. This is probably the most important thing to you. I remember talking to the Board of Commissioners several years ago on this concept, and Commissioner Hertzler at that time appropriately made the observation, well, this is kind of hypothetical cost savings. And he's accurate, it is hypothetical. It's kids that never made it to prison, all right? But it is a way that most of these studies do show the potential reduction in bricks and mortar, additional bed space that has to be incurred. It's accepted practice, so that's why I use it. You can see here that based on the average daily cost of incarceration of $74.25, which are standard costs that are set by the statewide correctional associations, and the average stay, that from 2009 to 2010 to 11 and 12, you can see in real numbers, they're not large, but 45 to 30 to 18 to 9, there may be a little bit of change on the back end there as it becomes, as there's total maturity in the sample, but the trend is exactly where it should be. And if you do the math, the cost savings is $240,000. That may come down a little bit if we add a couple on the back side. But here's the point, at no additional cost at all. We have not added staff in the 13 years I've been in charge, since 2004. As a matter of fact, we voluntarily gave back one. I think Commissioner Eichelberger was here. Before Larry came, we had given back one. We had 23, we went to 22 because we felt we could absorb the workload. So we've taken on all these initiatives, we've taken on all the challenges of the training and changing the culture, and we've done it at no additional cost. And this savings has been incurred because of less kids ending up in the prison. If nothing else, I think what I can say with confidence is based on volume, I don't think we're the driver that's filling up the prison. You can look at the real numbers there. We contribute, but we do our share of keeping kids out of jail. Time to relapse to rearrest. This is pretty, we would expect this. When a kid gets off of supervision, the most dangerous time for them is that first 3 months, and then from 3 to 6 months. This data is important to us as administrators and decision makers. The better data we have that tells us these kind of things, it allows us to use our vision to try to plan, to try to do a better job of addressing these issues in whatever way we can. Conclusion. Overall, probation involvement has a positive impact on a juvenile's risk to reoffend. A majority of juveniles see a reduction in risk throughout their supervision. certain community-based programs have a strong link to risk reduction. That's an important piece there because we're talking millions of dollars here. I mean, you know the kind of money that goes into needs-based. I'm not going to say that we've evolved to the point where we can draw concrete conclusions in all cases, but it is leading us in that direction where we can look at the service provider and say, you're getting it done, you're not getting it done. We're not going to spend the money on you, we're going to spend the money on you. And that's really what your concern should be. You don't want the money going down the rabbit hole. The YLS assessment appears to be significantly linked to recidivism. In other words, it's valid. You know, if YLS tells us the kid's high risk, buckle up. You know, we've got a problem. There are significant savings tied to the decrease of juveniles ending up in prison. There's your yearly averages. Juveniles are most susceptible to rearrest soon after they're released. I think that's it. That concludes my presentation. Questions?
Any questions?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm interested in the backward integration with CYS and the forward integration with adult probation and the prisons. So, Nikki, as we know, as anybody's been following events at CYS, has gone through a sea change, driven to significant extent, I guess, by the opioid stuff in the Sandusky on the legislative level. This is your stuff, which is absolutely amazing. Deals with your sample has come to maturity basically prior to those two big events. Do you see what's happening in Nikki's world at this point, then having a ripple effect through juvenile, both in terms of volume and the sorts of the risk levels that you're facing in this a newer wave of young people and your ability to continue to sustain these kinds of outcomes?
I do agree. I mean, you know, the thing about research is it takes a little while to get the stuff down to hard copy, but we're seeing anecdotally, we're seeing the same stuff with the other systems. We're seeing many kids involved with heroin, other opiates, prescription drugs, things of that nature. It's difficult out there. I mean, I don't want to lament too much, but this is a very different world than 20 or 30 years ago. Kids never get away. A kid that's bullied at school or maybe is an outfit, they used to be able to maybe sometimes go home to a safe environment. Well, with technology, that never happens now. They never escape. I think the stress, a higher percentage of kids, if you look at the PACE information data that comes out of the education system, there's a higher percentage of youth that are depressed, seeking mental health treatment. And I think the heroin thing, the thing about substance abuse, and I won't spend too much time on this, but we should be paying attention to it. It's obviously very significant, but I see it primarily as a symptom, not entirely. I've heard Judge Maslin talk about this. He's so skilled at it because he runs drug court, and he's saying, and I think at the last criminal justice policy team, we were somewhere, where he was talking about this, and he says what they're beginning to find is when they get them clean and sober, the other problems are there. So it's we have all those stories that if you have a drug addict, well, let me say this: if you have a pro-criminal thinking, uneducated person, I don't want you to think these things aren't important, but getting a high school education, getting a vocational skill, these things are obviously very important. Just like being clean from drugs and alcohol is very important. It's multifaceted. You have to address it. But if you have a pro-criminal thinking, uneducated person, and you send them to college or get them through high school, then you got a pro-criminal thinking, educated person. It's the same way with the drugs and alcohol. If you have an addict that is pro-criminal thinking, and you get them clean, then you got a pro-criminal clean person. Now, there obviously is overlap. It's not as simplistic as I'm making it out to be, but what I'm saying is that all the data out there, all the research is showing that these things are really important, but the most important thing is to change how they think. You have to change, it's the CBI stuff, it's the cognitive behavioral intervention stuff. You have to have them make their decisions differently, their choices differently, you know, obviously they need to get clean to be able to do that best, but I think the heroin thing's a big deal. I think it's essentially a symptom of many, many other issues that are going on with these kids, escape, and that's oversimplistic, and I'm not Jack Carroll, I'm not the expert that he is, but I do believe that there's a large degree of escapism. You know, these kids are hurting. There's a lot of, you know, I don't want to be too dramatic. Some kids are just bad, but a lot of these kids are hurting, and they don't want to face whatever's happening to them, whether it's, you know, problems at home or their insecurities about themselves. You know, Judge Lacey sees it every day in court. He's actually very good with it. You know, these kids come before him and they just have, you can feel their pain, but that doesn't mean you can make excuses for them. You can't deal with it, but I think the heroin thing is a very, very difficult issue to deal with because you have to address it or people are going to die. But at the same time, I don't think it's the solution to get them clean. I think it's the first step in a multi-step process, you know.
I think our collaboration with JPL has come a long way. We have regular meetings, the POs with my staff, with those joint cases, and you know, when you look at the chart, I mean, that's some of that too. We're collaborating more together with our services and working together with these families because there is a piece that there is a time needed for the PO or, you know, to go into that family and set some rules, but then, like Sam said, there's family issues. There's other things that need to happen behind that, and that's where we come in with that family piece. So I think, you know, the cases that we do have together and work together, I think that is going a lot better, and we're seeing that being more positive for both of us.
I agree with that, and I'm proud of that. You know, it's taken me a lot of years to realize it. You know, it's easy to sit down and say, what the heck's going on with children? They sit upstairs, what the heck's going on with juvenile probation? We're in it together. I mean, we truly are. And we have about 20 to 25 shared cases now that by court order, by court definition, are both children and youth with juvenile probation. And we have bi-monthly staffing meetings where our supervisor, Scott Shea, goes up and Nicole Crisp, I think it is, sits in, and the caseworkers from both sides come in, staff, collaborate, talk about what's happening with the cases, and try to troubleshoot, you know, if there are problems. My personal opinion, but I don't think it's ever been better. I mean, now don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of issues. We can't solve all the issues with these kids,
Right.
but I think there's a lot of collaboration going on between staff, and I'm actually very happy with it. With that being said, it's a new challenge every day.
It is.
You know, so.
You can never lose sight of the fact that this problem never goes away. And our population expands, and we always talk about crime-prone years. Usually, you're bad before 32, and then you finally sort of, okay, you know. But every generation is creating a whole new group that starts all over again. So you're doing that every 15 to 20 years. And I don't think anybody in this room is sitting around and saying, gee, parenting skills have gotten a whole lot better, you know, in the time. So you keep your eyes wide open.
Yes.
That's true, and we are a growing county. We're the fastest growing jurisdiction. I actually think we have a lot to be proud of. I mean, we have the lowest placement rate of any Class 3 county, and at the same time, we're showing good outcomes. We have safe communities. That doesn't mean that there isn't points of contention, you know. I've taken a few of those day-free calls, you know, where the district attorney's telling me where I messed up, and you know, sometimes he's right, you know. So the bottom line is, it's a contact sport, you know. There's some bumps and bruises, but the overriding thing I think that happens here in Cumberland County, we're committed, and you know, we get through it. We work together. We have a good system. We have good courts, and we have a good process. And you know, I'm proud of what we've done. We've come a long way. I think we're doing pretty good with it.
Well, you all have you know, tough jobs, and I know we're dealing with some tough situations. A lot of it starts right with the family. I wanted to ask, so what kind of collaboration do you have with our school districts on essentially the goal of trying to educate our young people and keep them straight?
You know, that's a good question, and I'm gonna be real straightforward with you. The school-based initiative, I think, was the height of our collaboration with the 9 public school districts in Cumberland County. We actually had POs in the schools. Due to resources, because we're not Harrisburg, where they've got a whole caseload or two in their urban school district. It doesn't work that way. We might, if you go up to Big Spring, there might actually be 2 or 3 kids in the school that we have under supervision. Most of the problem kids are farmed out to alternative ed sites or have dropped out of school. So I don't have the resources to just station a probation officer in each school. We do try to maintain those connections. Some school districts we do a better job with than others, but I do think that it's not as strong as it was at the height of the school-based phenomenon. We had to move away from that, turn the POs into community-based probation officers to serve both schools and kids that weren't in the school but lived in that region. It was better, it was clearly better allocation of resources based on the manpower we had. But it meant a little bit less time in the schools. So overall, I think we have a good grade. I think the schools are happy with us. I'd like to spend more time in the schools. You know, I got some, you know, I had one probation officer, he loves Cedar Cliff, you know, so I almost have to go drag him out of there sometimes, so they love him down there, you know, but I gotta get him to go do other stuff too. But another school district might have a different viewpoint, but you're not here all that much. So, I mean, it's a challenge, it really is, because it would actually be easier in some ways if we had larger, I'm not saying I'm wishing for an urban school district, but if we had larger school districts where it made sense from a manpower standpoint, you know, to just put a PO in there and keep them there all the time, really doesn't make sense for us. We can't do all the stuff we're doing, and I can't just have POs sitting over there pulling lunch duty and stuff like that. But I think overall, we're still getting a good grade from them. I say that with less confidence than I would have 10 years ago, to be perfectly frank with you, because we're just not quite as close.
But to add to that, we still do have resources at the school. Every one of the youth aid panels is associated with the school or school
And the
district.
student assistance team that Jack runs, and
Right.
we participate in those, and then there's,
Yep.
of course, children and youth initiatives. You know, I mean, there is plenty of good news. I guess maybe what I said sounded a little negative. I'm trying to be transparent. I feel like we're pulling in more directions now.
So it's not like there's not people going into the school. If they have a kid that's got a problem at school, it gets referred to juvenile probation. They may get referred back to the youth aid panel, which happens at school, and they get the school gets to see, oh, look, we set the kid up. Now he's going over here, and they're actually seeing the results, as opposed to some kid who comes down to see me and who may get on probation, but they don't see those results because they don't get to sit in the courtroom, they don't hear it all, they don't get to see the interaction that has occurred.
Student assistant teams that have existed for a long time, do they involve peers, right?
In some school districts they do, in some it's the drug and alcohol, and forgive me because I don't know their correct designation anymore. Politically correct, I'm not. They actually provide the counselors, and the counselors will go to school. So a child has a break and they have to go see the counselor because they didn't smoke a dope, or they got some drug addiction issue, or something else. But there are various levels of the student's assistance. One's called a STAR program, one's a SAP.
And Kingsburg, I think, has a STAR program.
Yeah, and some it is, you're correct, it's just peer-based. And they train them, and that's for the folks that have, problems getting along with other kids at school potentially, as opposed to somebody who's got an addiction issue.
Don't get me wrong, we do it pretty good. Like, if you went down to, I know East Penn Road, your home turf, they love Tom Hughes down there. Tom was there previously, and then he evolved out, and now he's back. They've had some change down there. I don't think Craig Robbins is there anymore. They have different school administrators, but Yuzi is down there on a regular basis, and so we still have a pretty good working relationship. It's just a challenge, we're growing, and we have a certain number of probation officers to allocate duties, and I've got POs doing CBI classes, victim awareness classes and running community service details. This is just one piece. I'm not whining about that. I'm just saying we're going in a lot of directions. I really honestly can say, you know, you'd probably have to give me at least another 3-4 probation officers just to set a PO in the schools all the time and handle everything, you know.
I don't know, Sam, I wasn't really suggesting that. I mean, I wasn't thinking along those lines. I was just wondering as to what is going on in our school districts, you know, these days relative to working with, and all the same goal, and that is to make sure the kids are, you know, being steered in the right direction. I mean, you have the addiction problem, and then you have the problems at home, okay? And some of them are together. You have the problems at home and you have the addiction problem, okay? But in terms of the issue of, you mentioned, you know, a lot of young people are depressed. We have depression problems, okay? And that's where I think, you know, if it's a school-age peer who can just be a good friend, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, I do have a professional opinion, a personal/professional opinion on this. There's a thing called a TEP, it's a truancy elimination plan. And what my experience has shown me is that when kids are being truant from school, from youngest to oldest, once it's kind of like the drugs, it's a symptom of other things. It's usually, it can be substance abuse, it can be issues at home, it can be mental health, it can be depression, things of that nature. And as schools have gotten better at creating and holding TEP meetings, and some are good at and some aren't. Some have included CNY workers, JPO workers, you know, drug and alcohol officials, mental health. I think, my personal opinion is that that's the ticket to getting to a lot of this stuff, because when kids miss in school, there's a reason for it. Particularly if they're younger. You know, if the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th graders miss in school, those kids don't wake up in the morning unless something's going on and say, I don't want to go to school. They want to go to school. So if they're not going to school, something else has happened. They're getting bullied, there's something bad at home happening, you know what I'm saying? So that is a ticket. My personal belief is, based on what I'm seeing, that these TEPs are a ticket into getting service to kids and from other human service agencies.
And I have 2 caseworkers that attend those meetings to be there as a support to the family, to offer community resources first. But if a family is at that meeting and saying, I can't, my son or daughter won't do these things, we will say, we'll offer you services then, and we initiate right then with the family. So we're in there with them during those meetings to help guide the family and what can be,
And I
what
think
matters.
over the last 10 years, would you agree, the schools have gotten much better with
Much
TEPs.
better.
There's some that are better than others, but
Absolutely.
I think I think there's been real progress in the schools with that.
Yes.
You know, everybody's read about the school to prison pipeline, you know, that kind of stuff, so it's real.
We're almost out of time, but I wonder if you could talk about the 4 languages. I think I've always been impressed with the collaboration with CYS and juvenile. But your stuff that comes through put to the adult probation and to the prison. And I wonder, I know Mike and Earl have instituted risk assessment now. And are we seeing, or are we in the process of developing the same kind of, you know, sort of team, cross-departmental, multidisciplinary approach? That's question 1. Question 2 is, how's our adult probation doing in terms of, and I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, but adopting an approach like yours as compared to the old trail, nail, and jail?
Well, I really, you know, you are putting me on the spot. I'm not going to speak for Darby. He talks to me. I'm really proud of you know, his evolution over the years, you know, because he worked with us. The stuff he tells me, I'm impressed with. That he has a plan. I think it's hard work to change culture, and I think it's even harder for them. It's difficult for us. But it's even harder for them because most adult probation officers that get into the criminal justice system had a certain vision of why they were doing that work. At least on the juvenile side, there's a mix there, but a lot of them are like, hey, I want to help kids. I'm not sure if it's necessarily the same vision on that side, but you know, I guess what I'm saying is I think his challenges are significant. I think his plan is good. I think it's a long-term process, Larry. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I do believe that putting assessment into place is a really good step, and I think it's fair for me to say, and he's doing this, he needs data. You need data to be able to both speak to staff and to others to say, this is what we're seeing, this is where we have to put our resources, you know, and I think he's going to be able to do that soon. I've been impressed with the things he said to me, but I do think he has a considerable challenge in front of him. And I'll be open about this. I think a lot of it is the courts too. You know, if the judges are supportive and if the things that adult probation is doing, both in terms of violation practices and things like that, make sense to the courts, then it's going to work. You know, but it has to make sense to the courts. They are the decision makers. You know, there's been a considerable amount of dialogue between Judge Haddis, former PJ, and Judge Placey, and Judge Naslin on the things we do, and we just don't do them in a vacuum. We do the things that make sense to them, you know, and that same kind of communication has, I'm assuming it's occurred with the courts, but,
I'll answer that, yeah, it is. We have started that, we actually, it is gonna be a global change. We had a meeting, what's his name, Skip, the guy who came up from Florida. And
Mark Carey.
Carey, yeah, he came up and gave us the overview of that. They've already started using a risk assessment tool, the Ohio-based one. And ORAS, yeah, and I'm seeing that come through. And that helps me in certain types of cases when I see people that, I see something on there, maybe I'll change the length of the tail I've given them simply because they need more time to get something done in their life, a treatment, or a process or programming of some nature in there that I otherwise wouldn't have seen. At the same time, I've also been able to curtail some of the length of a sentence, of the end portion of a sentence I've done, matching, because I only wanted the person to have a long enough time to pay off the fines and costs, because we now have a fine and cost program that's dealing with that sort of thing, so I don't have to, my focus isn't on that now. It's not always on that now. It's more on a more specific need of that particular individual.
And understand that the challenge is partly volume too. We might have anywhere from 160 to 200 kids under supervision at any given time. So they've got several thousand. And the volume of cases coming through, my opinion is that he needs to, through data and good decision-making, pick out swaths, sections of the population that he wants to attack with the ZBP stuff, because I don't really think he has the resources to do it, for everybody. You have to pick and choose how you do it, because the volume is so more overwhelming on the adult side than it is on the juvenile side, in all honesty, from what I'm hearing. I think there's 1,000 DUIs a year alone, just DUIs.
If Mike or Earl got someone who, as a guest at the chateau, if they found out that their risk assessment, if they found out the person had been in juvie, and they do their risk assessment and find out that they have a big question, does it jive with what your risk assessment was? Can they call you and find out? Do you guys share information? Is there a benefit? If not, is there a benefit to doing that?
Well, I have to, there is confidentiality rules, things are not, the adult criminal justice system does have access to our information in certain circumstances, but say somebody was arrested for the first time and was in prison because they couldn't make bail, that might not necessarily qualify at that point the sharing of juvenile information that was confidential, I'm not sure, we'd have to think about that, but you'd have to be concerned about that.
But we have had cases, and I'm thinking of two off the top of my head,
we do have shared cases.
where a juvenile's still not finished with the juvenile probation office, and they go out and they get adult charges.
Yeah.
And juvenile probation is able to react to them much quicker than the adult charges are. And in two cases, I put those juveniles who are now adults in adult prison by revoking their bail because they needed treatment that we had tried several different plans with juvenile probation and weren't successful with. Now they're going to the adult side. And I know, I can't remember her name right now, Ramona? Christine Ramona. And talking to her and saying, look, we've already done these things. And I don't know if she got information from juvenile probation about it, but she's getting the assessment for this person because that's the condition of their release.
Yeah. And you do have to, and I know you know this, I know you're a smart guy, and risk reduction is only one piece of this, and that assessment, you get Judge Ebert, obviously, you know, Earl and I were talking about this earlier, I won't go into details, but there's a certain amount of low-risk offenders that are currently in the prison right now on violations. Here's the bottom line, Judge Ebert could look at that and say, I don't care, I'm prioritizing restoration, this guy threatened the victim, and there might not be new charges. Or this guy, I need deterrence here. He was in a group with 8 other offenders and did this, this, and this. And his assessment might say he's low risk, but I'm sending a message. You know, it's very complex. You know, there's different reasons why certain courses of action are taken. But I understand the methodology. You know, you want transparency to all of that. But it's not necessarily as easy. Let's do all this with the low risk, let's do all this with the moderate risk, particularly when you're dealing with adult offenders that have evolved to the point where there's real concern that, you know, someone may get hurt or.
Sam, thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome. Thanks for
Very,
your opportunity.
very good information, especially for somebody new. And I appreciate that the folks are doing this. Obviously not an easy thing. Is there any other business to be brought up front of the board here?
No, I just want to thank everybody for what they're doing too, and that is, you're dealing with some tough situations, and I understand that. You know, I was thinking back to when we were talking here when I was on the school board, you know, many years ago, we had, you know, some student disciplinary hearings that, you know, it was like, where the young person was brought in, and both his parents were there, and it was like out of control. I mean, they were just, you know, he wasn't listening to them. You know, they were shouting back and forth. They had a real serious problem. And I was thinking back to my girls, they're all grown, successful now, thank goodness. But I also know that a lot of it too is, you know, who they hung around with, you know, in school. You know, and you know, we got a lot of kids, we've got kids with some serious problems at home. And that's why I kind of like this focusing in on the peer groups, if we can.
Well, it still always amazes me that we allow people to drop out of school in this day and age where you know if you don't have an education, you're not going to have any future.
Yeah.
And, but let's face it, the school boards, yeah, I guess if I was there, it'd be in the same way. That's getting a kid that's a troublemaker and gets low test scores out of the picture, and I don't have to deal with it. And then we deal with it here.
Well, and I was thinking, Skip, along the lines that, you know, I mean, this is where, you know, that tough love comes in, you know, where essentially there has to be consequences for your actions. So it's a balance, you know, because you also want to rehabilitate if you can. I was thinking about this one student disciplinary hearing we had where essentially everybody had written this kid off. This kid was going to be a troublemaker. There's nothing you can do to change anything. And of course, I'm always trying to look for the silver lining. How can we save this? You know, because you know, I mean, if you're doing this at this age, okay, just think what it's going to be down the road later on. You know.
Well, you make me think, and I will say this is my disclaimer, these are probabilities. You know, there are low-risk kids that get in trouble to do stuff. And, you know, you either support this stuff from a probability standpoint or you don't. And because guess what, we're not right all the time. Just like there's high-risk kids that sometimes don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
But here, my point is, for those that are not bought into this or don't want to follow a methodology, there's opportunities to say, well, what happened here or what happened there, because there's no certainty. We can't look at, we can do probabilities with genetics, things like that, but we can't say, oh, you're going to be a murderer or you're going to do this or you're going to do that. And so there is an opportunity there, but the last thing I'll say is the reason this is a good way of operating is even beyond helping the kids and all this stuff, is the professionalism it brings to the operation. It's less subjective, it's more objective. It does bring a professionalism that I think is needed, particularly in a profession where I don't get to see what they're doing about 80% of the time. They're out doing something else. There needs to be some methodology, so it's helpful.
Thank you, everybody. We're good.